We had about a 30 to 40% uplift within the first 3 months of the out of home. And, look, it depends on your industry, right? We're not selling t-shirts or bottles of water or tackies or those kind of things. It's a big decision. It's well thought out. It's a very considered purchase. So the marketing team sort of, once the bubbles have gone up or the out of home is up, they were like, okay, but nothing's changed. Understand, it's not going to change. This is going to take some time because it's, who are these guys? Let me go and research. I start searching and now I start to get some Facebook ads and some Google ads, etc., etc. So the awareness side was there.
Welcome back to the Beyond the Bubble podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do subscribe. Today is a client point of view episode, and we know that you as our audience absolutely love the client point of view episodes and even asked for more of these episodes in 2026. Today, we are joined by Calvin Collett, the founder and CEO of Melon Mobile. Melon Mobile is pioneering South Africa's first fully customizable mobile network. And Melon Mobile has been playing in such an effective, creative, and out-the-box way in the out-of-home landscape recently, and for their launch in 2024 and for their campaign in 2025. They really have been pushing the boundaries and being so effective and impactful in the way that they operate and activate within the out-of-home landscape. And today we're going to be talking about some of those out-of-home campaigns, which myself and Livia are so excited about. Hi, Calvin. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, guys. Really appreciate the time and I look forward to the podcast.
We're also looking forward to this episode with you. We've been keeping an eye out and seeing how Melon Mobile is playing out in the out-of-home landscape, and we've been dying to have this conversation with you. But before we get into the incredible out-of-home campaigns and how you've played on with other brands and how you've really stood out in the landscape and really, really used it creatively and following the right creative principles within your out-of-home artwork and messaging, before we dive into all that detail, I think let's set it up for our audience and ourselves by sharing a bit more about Melon Mobile. And if you can you share us also, how did you come up with the name?
So look, I was an executive at MTN for 5 years. So I was running the fixed line division. And one of the things I looked at was, how do we diversify what we're doing? And, what are consumers looking for? And I mean, ultimately, it's fixed mobile convergence. So it's taking fixed line and mobile and trying to put a single proposition together, right? And very few operators in the world have got this, right? So it's something I wanted to do while I was at MTN. So anyway, COVID happened. So, ultimately the plans for, what we had didn't really work out. So I decided, look, if we're not going to do it at MTN, I still believe in the opportunity. And I believe that South Africa needs a digital operator. So left in 2022 and then started to build Melon. So in short, we're a fully digital mobile network, customizable plans, flexibility, month to month. And we kind of compare ourselves to or call ourselves the Netflix of telco. So it's, really trying to give that month to month experience and flexibility, but yet still the same quality that you would get as if you were on, one of the big mobile operators. So kind of that's the background. In terms of the name, we always knew marketing and sales were going to be critical to this business. The technology, we take voice, data, SMS, it's pretty commoditized and there's not much to differentiate on that aspect. So one of the key ways was, how do we actually give this brand a personality, a persona, etc. And for me, I wanted something that had no meaning. So, in typical creative and agency style, the guys came up with like Blitz Mobile and this mobile and that mobile, which I hated all of them because all of them had a preconceived connotation or, thought pattern behind it. So, Melon, when the guys eventually came up, well, it's actually my wife came up with it, to be honest. I was like, that's perfect because it has no meaning. It's fresh. Look, we've taken melon as the watermelon, but I mean, that's, we'll take that. But I think the important thing there is that we can now create a persona around melon versus the sort of preconceived view of a name or whatever else. So for us, that was critical that, we had something that was fresh, fun, and we could build build something around it.
Yeah, Calvin, I love the background that you've shared for so many different reasons. I love how the name came about, and I love that your wife came up with it too. I think that's such a lovely story for like founding a business and having like a family tie that comes into it. You touched on wanting to be the Netflix of mobile networks, and I think what I really love about that too is there's such a cool factor, right? Even the approach to the name is that you didn't want a name that was a specific thing that represented, something else. Even your approach to the name around wanting it to mean nothing so that it wasn't preconceived to anything, I think is just speaks to this really cool factor. And I think that is how we've seen the brand play out in out of home. I think when we first saw your first campaign come to market, everybody sat up to be like, hold on a second, who's Melon Mobile and what are they doing to billboards? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And I think that, it was such a smart campaign. We're going to get into the details of the campaign. As Kirsty mentioned, like, we are both so excited to have you with us because of the way that you guys have showed up to market. And I think just understanding the background on how the brand was created and built just kind of makes it more make sense in a way. Seeing how you've approached the out of home has not been a stock standard approach. I think, you
100%.
guys know this. It's such a competitive category in general, and in out of home, it's a very competitive category in the telco category that you're entering. It's a huge category that you're entering with a lot of historical brands that sit there that are well established
Totally.
in the market and that have more inventory than you. They've got bigger budgets, they're booking more sites. So how do you enter the market and compete? And I think what you guys did with your first campaign and your second one just shows the strategic approach that you've taken and how you've managed to actually cut through the clutter. The first campaign was all about a guerrilla style takeover. It looked like these huge decals were stuck all over the billboards. So, there was one referencing now boarding for Lyft billboard. And then you thought, okay, now building and Melon Mobile, who is this? What is happening? There was one with Fuff and his Speedos and he was covered up. And, there was so much fun that was had, but it had those ingredients that we've seen from some of the other brands in out of home that really make people notice, like, this is creative that's been tailored for out of home. It's
Yeah.
very intentional. And there's that link of wanting people to react online to this. And I think that
100%.
we've seen this being done so well by brands like Naked Insurance, Pineapple. Those brands kind of come to mind almost immediately. And Melon Mobile's now become part of that around these brands that are using out of home in such a clever way. So,
Yeah.
the first campaign, as I mentioned, had this kind of decals that were stuck over. And the beautiful campaign we saw last year really made everybody stand up on this play with the other brands that came to market so nicely around, 100% not the insurance for you, referencing Pineapple because we're just a mobile network.
Yeah.
It was so smart. And I wanted to find out from you, looking back over the past two campaigns that you guys have done, what have been the highlights for you on those campaigns and how they've kind of the reaction you've received from them in market?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to take a step back and then sort of I'll answer the question. I think, to your point, it's been very, very deliberate, right? It's a massive category, massive industry. I mean, the total spend is you're looking at about 3.5 billion rand just on marketing in the top four. Never mind anybody else outside of it, right? So we knew up front we had to cut through the clutter. And for me, it was what did we want out of home to do for us? And the most critical thing there was trust. There's one thing, and I think it's where Naked and Pineapple also struggled or had to figure out, is having a digital only brand is great, but it misses the trust factor, right? How do I know that this brand, if they want my credit card, are they going to send me the SIM card? Does the network work? There's lots and lots of questions, and are they going to be around next week? So when we decided to do the out of home, it was let's build some trust behind this one, so that and the thinking there was, if you've got billboards, there's a credibility behind it because you must have a bit of money out there, et cetera, et cetera. And then it was the campaign, and those campaigns. So I've got an in-house agency. The great thing about that was that we could curate these campaigns to specifically cut through the clutter. So, I will say the campaigns were very deliberate. We knew what the ingredients were, to be able to cut through the clutter. But it took months of planning, really understanding what are we trying to achieve. On our second campaign, which was quite interesting, we really wanted to land the fact that we're a mobile network, right? Which was quite interesting because, we felt like we had done a decent enough awareness job in the past, but would find that, people weren't associating mobile or Melon and mobile together, right? So to your point, taking, KFC, we don't eat finger licking chicken because we're a mobile network, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's one thing we'll continue to do. And I mean, I think out of home for us is going to be very big in the next 18 months. We've got another campaign coming out soon, and it's going to be bigger. It's, I want to say better, but let's see if we can better that. And I think the last thing is the golden thread, right? Is if you're going to do out of home, to your point, how do we make sure that comes back into your digital social channels? Because we don't have an enormous marketing spend or budget. If you can get those to work in tandem, so get the guys who see the billboard to go onto the socials, start talking about it. You just get a far higher return off the back of those billboards. So, for us, it was all part of the strategy, all part of the plan. And, we're delighted with the response we got to the billboards.
One of the things that stood out for me is how you knew that using out of home was going to be the perfect medium for you to build the trust, and that you needed to build trust was a key business problem that you needed to solve. What mediums would you use to be able to, bring that solution forward for you? And what I love about out of home, it is a trust building medium. And one of the things is there's a stat from OAAA who says 84% of consumers trust brands that advertise in out of home, because it really does give that big brand feel. It's also a stat from Kantar Media MasterChef in South Africa. In their last 2 years, Kantar Media Reactions, they said that out of home is the most preferred channel for consumers to be communicated on. So it builds trust.
Wow.
They prefer to be communicated on out of home. They expect to see advertising in the out of home and landscape, and they, as they're driving on roads and highways. So they're more receptive to the messaging that comes from these spaces. So it's such a powerful medium. And the way that you saw that immediately within your media strategy to say, we need to be building trust. We don't have a brick and mortar store for people to go in and to actually engage, buy the SIM card, as you're referencing it earlier on. Like, you needed to build this trust, and you saw out of home as the perfect medium to do this for the brand, and how it's been doing it for the brands, the likes of a Naked and a Pineapple. So it really, really underscores those stats and all these conversations that we often have about out of home really driving that trust building and that brand equity building and that fame effect, which I think is where you're going to be playing in now by the sounds of it in your next campaign, is that campaigns where out of home is included, it increases the fame effect by 33%. So I think where you're playing next, by the sounds of this exciting, bigger, better, or different approach that you're going to be activating in the next few months, I think you're going to be very much, by the sounds of it, playing in that fame effect, which is really, really exciting.
From Sunrise and Josie to lights that never sleep, we are Network X outdoor media specialists. With over 1,000 media platforms across Gauteng, we don't just place ads. We capture audiences right where life happens. From premium digital displays to iconic city views, we turn attention into impact every single day. So join the experience. Network X out of home.
What I found also quite fun is that in out of home, the brands that tend to be going viral or connecting a lot with consumers is this humor tonality. It is this fun, it is this cheeky tonality. And I feel like that's very much where Melon's been sitting. It's where the likes we're referencing a Naked and Pineapple in this episode. So referencing a bit of how they've been playing. You also pulled into Savannah. I think you played on Savannah in one of your lines as well. We're not dry. You can't drink us because we're a mobile network. And you've been playing in that humor tonality. And I'm really finding that consumers are being, the public and the consumers are so receptive to that tonality. And I think it's because, you're going to work, might have had a stressful day, you're on your way home, you want something that's going to lighten your day, that's going to make you smile, that's going to make you stop, right? And out of home's great for imparting that type of tonality. And is that something you consciously made when decision you consciously made when you're building out this creative messaging for your campaigns, particularly for this, recent one, because we're a mobile network?
from day one, right? I mean, we set out. I mean, it's a couple of reference points. Ryan Reynolds was a baseline, so we actually wanted a Ryan Reynolds type character, sort of this dry humor. He was definitely on the radar, and we actually tried to find our own Ryan Reynolds. It just we couldn't find the right person to land it properly. But that was always the kind of tonality we were going for, sort of very dry, tongue in cheek, kind of Nando's type vibes. I mean, that was the secondary reference for us. But to your point, I think, if you're going to be driving from, Joburg to Pretoria to Joburg, you're seeing traffic for an hour, at least make a billboard or two make you laugh or, catch your eye, etc. And once again, if you're going to cut through the clutter, that's the way to do it. And depending on how fast you're driving, and maybe you're in bumper to bumper, you're going to spend more time watching that. But at least when you get to the office and, search, there's a bit of interaction that comes with the back of that. And, our whole thing was that if we keep to the humor, we keep it interesting, and we really, really make a concerted effort to put out a campaign that is both engaging, delivers the message that we want in terms of trust, credibility, etc., creates the awareness that we exist as a mobile network, as an alternative to the big four, then we've done our job, right? But it's taking all of those factors into account versus, chucking up a billboard and saying, well, geez, we've got a presence of 50 to 100 billboards. Congratulations. That was never our aim. It was very deliberate in terms of, what do we want to achieve out of this and how do we get there? I think what I find so interesting about the process behind the campaigns, and how we got there. I mean, this last campaign, I'll never forget. The guys had probably come up with 15 different ideas. And I was like, guys, these are all terrible. They're never going to land. And we were sitting there, and the guys were kind of despondent, like, geez, well, we don't know what else to do. And
you're shooting down all their ideas, Calvin.
All of their ideas. And he turned over the page, said, look, this thing's half-baked, but I'm going to run it past you. Just tell me what you think. And that was the campaign that landed, right? It was and that's the great thing behind a process like this, is that it's got to immediately feel right. It's got to tick all those boxes, and that did it. I mean, the guys were almost sheepish to show me, but kind of did. And then I was like, well, that's one. I mean, it's obvious. It's just like makes so much sense. And that was the Savannah, the KFC, etc. So yeah, it's great using the sort of existing brands. And I mean, what's really nice is that the other brands really took well to it. Look, we contacted them all beforehand, to make sure that they were going to be okay. So, I think South Africa, some of the big brands, especially the international ones, can be quite funny when it comes to IP and those kind of things. So we were very careful in terms of not pushing too far. But I think the one nice thing is South Africans appreciate good humor and just trying to do something a little bit
Good
different.
banter.
So it landed really well. Exactly.
Yeah. I love that you've offered up that you guys had engaged with the brands, kind of just that background story. And that's why I love this client point of view series, is that, just how you've shared now, you have these 50 ideas coming at you, the one lands, the guy's like, I'm not even sure if this is half an idea. What do you think? And you're like, that's it. And I love that because, it just makes you enjoy the campaign even more when you have these little behind the scene nuggets of like, wow, okay, that's how this actually ended up coming to life. It wasn't the first idea that you loved. So I love that you've shared that. And I think what you guys also did really well is that you leveraged off bigger brands in different categories. So it wasn't like you targeted other mobile brands. It wasn't like you only did the insurance category. You had the alcohol category, you had car category, you had like so many different categories that you touched on, but it was brands that were big and out of home, which almost just speaks again to like the strategy on top of a strategy, almost like that intentional approach that you had to out of home, which I think it landed really well in the market. I think what I'm really enjoying about this conversation and you as a guest is that, you're giving us the marketing piece, but you're also the CEO. And often in these conversations, the conversation come round to, the marketing team is always like, we're going to have to prove ROI to the CEO and to the board and justify why we're spending what we are in media and in out of home. And I wanted to ask you, from a results and performance perspective, how did you see out of home performing well for you? You referenced there's a campaign coming up. I can't wait to see what it is when it lands, but it's obviously working well for the brand. But if you have any information you could share with us, or uplift that you've seen, or how out of home specifically performed, especially as you mentioned, you're an online business without brick and mortar, supported so wonderfully by the out of home channels.
Yeah, I mean, we had about a 30 to 40% uplift within the first 3 months of the out of home. And, the one thing that I think a lot of people look, it depends on your industry, right? We're not selling T-shirts or bottles of water or tackies or those kind of things. Switching mobile network, it's a big decision. It's well thought out. It's a very considered purchase. So the the marketing team sort of, once the billboards had gone up or the out of home was up, they were like, okay, but nothing's changed. I said, guys, understand, it's not going to change. This is going to take some time, because it's, who are these guys? Let me go and research. I see the billboard every single day. Then I start searching, and I start to get some Facebook ads and some Google ads, etc., etc. So the awareness side was there. The conversion took a lot longer, but we had chatted to both Naked and to Pineapple. So I think, you referenced them. We could see the DNA correlation between both those brands, and that we were going to have similar problems that we needed to solve. So, I built relationships quite quickly or early on with both of them, and wanted to understand, what did out of home do for them, and how quickly did they see the response, etc. And a lot of both kind of said, it's not immediate, but don't abandon it, because within 3 months you'll start to see an uplift. And it literally was, within 3 months we started to see the uplift. Our online sort of chatter in the immediate campaign, that we saw at about 180% increase. So that was the immediacy of it. But once again, because it's a very measured purchase consideration, it's always going to take longer, right? It's, one, I'm still in contract. Two, feels like a bit of a schlep. But you get to that point where, one of the networks irritates you for the day or whatever else. You say, okay, now it's my time to switch. Or you realize how much you actually are overspending, etc. Then you switch. So it's not I see it on a billboard today and I switch tomorrow. So you've got to be very careful in terms of understanding your customer behavior and the life cycle before you just rush and say, well, geez, I had no uplift. What's going on? The billboards are a waste of money, right? So I think that's something that I had to manage very carefully with my board, because they were not fans of out of home. They were like, how do we prove return on ad spend? How do we prove that it's working? So it was quite a difficult thing to sell. And, the one thing I've always been key on is, if you're not going to try, we'll never know. But sitting back and not trying is going to be an even bigger fail, right? We could see that we lacked the credibility and trust. That was from real customer interactions, right? We'd see guys going through the funnel, and then there was just a drop off. Going through the funnel and then a drop off. So we actually contacted these customers, kind of like, why are you not converting? What's going on? And trust and credibility were the number one thing that came back. So, when we went to the board and said, look, this is what we're going to do, as much as there was pushback, it was the managing expectations in terms of when that return and uplift was to be expected. And but it certainly made a big difference.
Yeah, I love that. And also, I think we need to get these board members on the podcast one day, because there's so many conversations we have around teams having to motivate up, and we get it. Like, you want to prove ROI. There's like Kirsty and I've been in these meetings when there's almost like, I need a number on my spreadsheet. And for out of home, the number, needs to look like this, or else we're not going to be reinvesting or investing in out of home. So I get
100%.
it, but I'm glad that you're such an advocate for the platform and actually were able to, reach out to other brands that you guys could see were doing it well. But how does that journey start? And again, what's going on in the background? I think you've touched on trust a lot. We know that out of home builds trust. And I
Yeah,
think the other thing is the longevity, right? So just
Mm.
having a campaign only where you're active for a short period and then expecting an immediate uplift is quite unrealistic, even if it is an FMCG product, maybe if it's for a drink or something that's easier to make a quick purchase. I also don't believe people are driving on the highway, see a billboard, and they immediately turn off as fast as they could to go and get whatever was advertised. I wish that that's the way that
100%.
billboard
Yeah,
advertising works, but it is about this trust and brand association and building that credibility over time. And I think out of home is an amazing channel to actually be able to do that.
100% agree. 100% agree.
I want to dovetail there and say, you don't just build trust overnight. You've got to have the billboard campaign, and then you have to measure that and you have to study that, right? Like you can do studies with Kantar, you can do brand lift studies, you can do brand salience studies, but ultimately you need the time to build the trust. The consumer is not just going to see one billboard and say, okay, well now the brand's up there, it's fine, I trust them. Like there's so much more behind
Not
it.
at
It's the
all.
tonality, it's the creative messaging, but then it's also the delivery. So yes, I know your brand, but now how's the service delivery? What's the word of mouth about this brand?
Totally.
What are my friends saying? Are they putting their money where their mouth is? If I do sign up with them, what is their service delivery like, etc. So it's like it almost primes for trust, but there needs to be that closing
Totally.
loop that happens from a brand point of view, from a business delivery point of view with the consumers. But out of home is so great at priming for that trust, but it ultimately can't happen with one billboard or one digital screen that goes up, for a
Definitely
month. So I
not.
completely agree. There
Definitely
has to
not.
be that longevity as a part of your campaign.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the point is, if you've got a bad product behind the campaign, it's not going to help, right? And I think that's the point you make. It's that you still need to make sure the brand promise, the credibility, all those things have actually got to be real and intrinsic inside the product and service that you're offering. And yeah, the longevity is a key factor. I mean, we saw that as well. It's flash in the pan is certainly not going to make any difference whatsoever.
Calvin, I need to ask you, this campaign that you've just run now I'm like I'm on the edges of knowing what the next one is. I cannot wait. Are you going to be including digital out of home in your next campaign, or you can't say yet? Because I'm quite interested to see, or did you include digital out of home in your previous one? Because I saw a lot more static.
No, we only did static. I've got to be
Okay.
honest, I'm on the fence on digital out of home. My media buying guys are trying to sell me on the digital out of home in a big way. I have a view that if we're going to do it once again, it can't be static then. My view is it's got to be something that's different, because you've got a much shorter span. I mean, listen, some 15 seconds, some 30 seconds, depending. And how do you make that stand out? And that's the one challenge that I still, as part of this campaign, if we're going to do digital out of home, which the guys are pushing us to do a portion or percentage of, is what are we going to do that's different, right? And I've got to be honest, we don't have the answers. But I'm not convinced that just taking, what you had on static and putting it on digital is the right way to do digital out of home. It's my opinion. I mean, I'd be interested to see what you guys think, but I think that you have to have a very specific, it's a different medium, and don't treat it like a out of home as a digital out of home. So treat it with respect of that and build the content for that. So that's what we're grappling with at the moment, is what do we do that, I mean, I love this new campaign, but I don't know how to put it onto digital out of home. And the guys saying, well, we just put it as the statics. I'm like, no, I don't. I just don't buy it. I don't see how it's going to land. I don't see how it's going to have the effect that we want, right? So it's I don't have a straight answer. Well, the answer's clear that
No,
I'm
it's
not
fine.
convinced of
And
the
I love
medium
a good debate.
until
And I think, Yeah, I agree with you. You can't just use the medium just because it's out there, right? It needs to strategically align. It needs to align creatively. Like, there is some campaigns where it works and there's some campaigns where it's not the right medium to use, right? It's not just because it's, I don't want to say new and shiny, because it's not new and shiny. It's been out in field for a while, but there's a lot more clients who prefer to do digital out of home just because it's flexible, it's easier to go live with, there's no production costs. But it's not just about that. It's about strategically, how is it actually aligning to your campaign? How is it aligning to your creative messaging? For me, the biggest thing about digital out of home that's not 100% being utilized as much as it should is that it drives relevancy. And the reason it does relevancy is that you can be contextually relevant with digital out of home based on time of day, based on certain dynamic triggers. So there's so many different dynamic triggers that can trigger different creative messaging. And when you start using digital out of home in that way, it starts driving relevancy with the consumer. And it's actually proven through a lot of research that through neuroscience, it proves that there's a lot more brain responses and a lot more ad recall when it is that contextual relevancy. So using digital out of home for those type of capabilities are really, really powerful. But ultimately, I'm still excited to see your campaign and where it goes to. What I would love to ask you, though, is out of your previous campaign, what would you say were maybe your favorite taglines that you used?
Look, the KFC one was an interesting one, and the We Buy Cars one, because we put both of them, well, there were more than one of them, but they were right outside a KFC billboard and right next to a We Buy Cars billboard, right? So the contextual relevance there as well is, we could really make those two work extremely hard. So there's a lot of fun that we could still have with those two messages. So look, back to your digital out of home. I'm quite interested in the contextual relevance. That actually makes sense. And then the situational stuff. I mean, I'm going to add that to the campaign. I like that.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think that, a lot of conversations we have around digital out of home with clients, specifically the first feeling is we don't want to share with other brands. And it is part of how digital out of home is built. But I think to some of the points that Kirsty's made around, I think that at times digital out of home is included in a lazy way in a plan in order to just top up some exposure. And it's actually
100%.
not given proper focus because you're paying a premium to be on a digital screen. You are sharing it with other brands, but if you're not changing the creative or have different creative messaging for digital out of home versus static, I think you're missing a piece. And you should almost have a mini campaign or creative brief completely separate for digital out of home.
100%.
Obviously, the campaign look and feel will be the same, but you should be changing that messaging at least once a month. At least you should have multiple creative messaging that you're not communicating on the static boards, but that support the static boards that you printed.
Agreed.
And I think it's looking at not how we're going to turn our static billboard ad into something that can live on digital out of home. It's more how will the digital out of home support and complement and give additional messaging that we can't regularly rotate. Some brands are putting in 3 to 5 different creatives that are on rotation. So you have to be clever and cheeky with the messaging, but so intentional. So I definitely think that there's something worth looking at that. And I think it's that intentional approach to out of home that makes it more memorable for people.
Agreed. Yeah, I like that. I mean, the intentionality is what it's about, right? I think, the statics agreed. And making specific content for the digital makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah. As we head towards our close, I think we've covered so much from a creative perspective, from the performance side of things, how the brand is playing out. I think Kirsty and I have probably both been hoping you're going to drop some nuggets into what's coming up for the latest campaign, but we will wait with everybody else to enjoy it. I just wanted to ask you, our closing question is that, what excites you the most about the out-of-home landscape in South Africa or some of the other markets, some innovation you've maybe seen, or what's on your wish list for out-of-home? I think if that's maybe a way that I could look at it, or what's exciting you at the moment?
Look, I think it's the fact that brands are understanding that out of home does work, and they're starting to put out really fun campaigns. We live in such it's the newest word I've learned, which is phygital, but you're physical and digital. But if you can get those two to work together, it makes so much sense. And I think that's where a lot of guys go wrong. They're kind of very focused on the out of home, but then ignore the digital side, or very focused on digital, forget the out of home. So I think it's finding that very careful balance between those two is what I'd like to see more and more brands doing. And then, I think brands working more harder and closer together. I think, we've proven that it does work. The other brands didn't pay us a cent, but you had that automatic recognition of the other brand, gave us a bit of credibility, but it worked. You got two brands sort of getting exposure through one campaign. And I think, I'd like to see more of that. I think there's a lot that South Africans can do together, or South African brands can do together to sort of still make fun campaigns, but actually get sort of dual brand awareness and credibility out of it.
Yeah, I love those examples that you've shared. And I think also it's nice to see when I first saw the campaign referencing the other brands, I immediately was like, oh, I wonder if Pineapple knows about this. And I think you want that little moment because it's that intrigue that people get like, oh, hold on, these guys are having fun with each other. And I wonder if they got permission and what's in the comments. And you go to the comments. So I really love that. And I think it landed really well. I think that what you guys are doing in Out of Home is fantastic. I really can't wait to see the new campaign that comes out. And it's really been just fascinating to sit down with you, get a little bit of the background, the behind the scenes, which I absolutely love. And yeah, we're definitely going to be watching this space in Out of Home. So thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. It's been fantastic to sit down with you.
Amazing. Yeah, I really appreciated the chat, and it was certainly insightful.
Thank you to the sponsor of today's episode. Your support helps make Beyond the Billboard possible and helps us to bring you the first and only out-of-home podcast in South Africa.
Thanks for joining us today to go beyond the billboard. Subscribe to our podcast to ensure you don't miss out on our exciting content.
Join us again to go beyond the billboard.
1, 2